Hey everybody, happy Tuesday night. Welcome to my channel, Dream Camp Creations. My name is Seth Campbell. Normally what I'm doing on here is I'm playing the game Shadows of Brimstone to drinking games, and I do some unboxings and such, but I thought tonight I'd switch it up a little bit and just do a little model painting. I got some new models in recently and wanted to get those all ready to go. I'd like to get them ready for this Saturday's game, and so I thought I'd just kind of jump on live and do a little bit here and just kind of show some techniques. I'm not an expert by any means, but I've kind of picked up some things as I've gone along, a little self-taught here. So I thought I'd just kind of paint a few and kind of show you what I'm doing and just enjoy the process. I'd be doing this anyways, even if I wasn't doing it on camera and live. So I thought, well, we'll just turn it on and go for it. So just kind of show you what I've got going on here. I've got a few different ones to paint. I just picked up the Frontier expansion set, so I've got some Bandits to paint. I've got 6 of these guys that need to go into their color scheme here, get them all dusty and ready to go. And then I've got 2 orphan characters, which I'm very, very excited about because they're going to be introduced into our next mission, or at least one of them will. I've got some exciting things planned story-wise, so I'm very happy to get these in and get them ready to go. So I'm looking forward to incorporating them on Saturday. So I've got them all primed. So just if you haven't ever really done this before, depending on the set you get, the Brimstone models usually need to be assembled. So I've already assembled them. They come gray, and some of them come mostly pre-assembled. Some of them you have to put together. Like this one, the female orphan, her head was not included on her body, so you had to glue that on with, I used the Citadel glue, and had to glue a braid on there as well, and then you glue them to the bases. The Bandits and the other orphan were already ready to go, and so you just glued them to the base. I've been looking to add a little more three-dimensionality to some of my models, as you can kind of see with some of the finished ones. So I've been adding things like rocks and cutting out little pieces of balsa wood for some extra texture, which I've been enjoying. So for these, what I'm gonna do is paint them first. I did add a few little rocks for some gravel there, and then when I'm all said and done, I'm going to add some of this stuff for some desert brush, and I've got some cactuses and things to add, which I'll put on the bases as well. So that kind of is just a fun texture to add at the end there, which I feel kind of adds to the quality of them. So once you glue them up and you glue them to your base and you get things set, then the first thing you're going to do is prime them. And so I just use a regular spray paint. I use matte black for most of my models. However, there are a few times you might want to use a matte white if you're working more with lighter colors. Even still, sometimes though, I kind of just do matte black because I feel like the darker colors read better, and if you do lighter colors on black, you just have to do more coats, and I don't mind that. But so typically I kind of stick with black because a lot of what I do is more in the darker color scheme, so the matte black works just fine for that. But then you spray paint them, you get them all primed up and ready to go so the paint sticks better and you have a good base. And then you start your process. All of the models with Shadows of Brimstone usually come with some painting guides, and I follow them to some extent. And then sometimes I'll throw in my own touches, like for some of these Bandits, I might vary up some of the color schemes on them, I'm not quite sure yet, and then add some of my own details. But that's the wonderful thing about model painting, is that they are yours. And at the end of the day, whether you're just collecting them or you're playing with them, they should be unique to you and represent your styles. And half the fun of these games, whether it's Shadows of Brimstone or Warhammer or anything like that, is the assembling, the collecting, and the painting of them. And I know a lot of people out there just paint them and sometimes never even play with them, and that is totally cool and fine to do. That's just part of the world. So if you're just getting into this for the first time or never tried anything, like, just buy yourself a cheap model and get some paints and go from there. As far as paints go, choices you have, a lot of people use the Citadel paints. That's kind of the big brand that's really good. I have been using the Shadows of Brimstone brand, their war paints, so I use some of those, but I'm kind of cheap these days right now, so I've just been getting some cheap Hobby Lobby model paint to use when I run out of the war paints. Eventually one day maybe I'll switch over to Citadel. It just might mean that the quality of the paint is a little lower, so you might have to work a little harder to achieve the same effects and the same vibrance. So, but that's fine with me. It's really kind of all up to you. So I'm just going to kind of jump in here. I'm just going to chatter away while I paint a little bit. Like I said, I would be doing this anyway, so welcome. Normally I'm enjoying a drink or two as I go, but model painting isn't really conducive to drinking games, so if you're there, you can crack one open as we start. So we've got one of our bandits going. So what I like to do is kind of figure out the steps, and then if I've got a series of models, go through and paint all of them in that first step, and then and sometimes if the coats are light enough or it takes long enough, by the time you get through one step on all the models, it might be dry enough to come back and do the next coat immediately. Otherwise you might have to wait. So we'll see where we get to. But what we're going to first start off with is mixing up some white and some black to do some dry brushing, which I had all my paints prepped, but I forgot to grab my black here, so I'm going to reach behind me. And that's green. There it is. Okay. I've got my little paint box here that I like to use to mix. You can see it's been well loved, has lots of paints already kind of dried in there. So we're going to mix together a little black and white to do some gray dry brushing on these guys to give them a dirty look to start with before we move into the details. So a lot of this is just kind of by eye and knowing what color you're looking for, and then you know get your amounts by how much you think you're going to need for all the models, and it just kind of takes some practice. You might waste a little paint at the beginning. I always still do sometimes, so I'm going to do just a little bit of black first. The black is pretty intense, so I don't want to go too heavy until I know I've got what I'm looking for. And then you can mix it up with anything. You can grab yourself a stick. A lot of times I just use the back end of a paintbrush because I'm just kind of messy like that. And then I'll just wipe that off. So we mix that up. I like the look of that. Okay. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is dry brush all of these with some gray. Dry brushing is basically where you take a little bit of that paint and then you brush off the excess until the paint is almost dry on there, and then you lightly dust it on there rather than painting a thick layer. And I like to have either some harder bristle brushes like this to do that, depending on the texture, or sometimes I'll even cut some. So like this one I've cut short, so I've got just a really coarse brush here with kind of a harder head on it, and so I'll just take a little bit of that gray, dab it off on my side here, and then just come in and start, and I'll pick an area and kind of go light at first and then come in heavier. And so you can see as I start to go, some of that first layer comes off, and so it just starts to lightly get on there. And so you have to know what you're looking for texture wise. And so what we're kind of going for is to just get him all kind of dirtied up and dusty, and then there will be areas that we're gonna come back over with different colors, and some that we might leave, I think is the idea. And so sometimes you might want a different style of brush, because you might be looking to achieve, with some of these creatures, you're looking like for scales, or you're looking to highlight the textures of the cloak or things like that. So just kind of knowing what the final look is supposed to be is a big factor in your technique and the brushes you use. So pretty good there. You can see dry brushing doesn't take very long. They dry pretty quick, so we're going to kind of bust through this first step pretty quick here. I'm not going to dry brush my orphans, I think, because they're not supposed to be quite as dark, so we're just going to do these bandits and then move on to the next step. And I'll probably bounce between them as I need to. And we may not get to the orphans tonight. I may just stick with the bandits. I'm not quite sure yet. Yeah, looks pretty good. I find model painting very therapeutic. It's just something fun to be able to kind of do a creative process that, someone else spent the time in designing these and building these, and then I get to come and bring the final breath of life to them, which is just very satisfying to watch these characters come to life. And as you go further and the more you do, they're yours, so you can tell a story on them with your paint. And again, even if you don't feel like you're the greatest artist, practice, you play around with it, you figure out what your look wants to be, so eventually we'll add some different colors. Maybe we'll make one of them stand out as the leader, or maybe we add some of my models that have various wounds on them or pieces that I've highlighted, and eventually those become important story-wise. So you get to really make them come alive and tell a story with them, which is very fun. And someone's already started that process, with the amount of detail they've invested in putting on the model, and then you are just bringing that full with the color. So I am kind of looking at the directions sometimes of how I'm painting. I know it looks a little random, but in some of these areas on the cloak, I'm trying to, swoop up a little bit because I want to match how the texture of that fabric would go. And then in some of these other areas, like on the legs or up here on the cloak, I'm kind of going down across the textures. You can see that there is some areas where it's raised, and so by going kind of down like this, not too heavy, I'm mostly hitting those areas there, so they kind of highlight a little bit. And again, I'm kind of just following the steps on the painting guide for now. So I'm kind of going as I go. I'm not exactly sure what the final look is supposed to be, so we'll see what kind of gets covered up and where we go from here. I'm guessing that we're probably gonna have a decent amount of black in there, and so these are just kind of highlighting those. Might even come back and dry brush with some brown and some other colors. So these techniques are, you would find them in a lot of other styles of painting as well. I spent many years as a scenic painter for theater, and so fairly familiar with the dry brushing techniques and wet blending and things like that. It's just a different outlet. For theater, you know, you're looking to build stuff on, paint stuff on a much larger scale. But you know, when you're doing like wood grain or things like that, you're going to be using these dry brushing techniques. If you're doing like brick or other things, you might be using sponging and wet blending. There's really no right or wrong. You just kind of play around and see. And if you get really experienced, then you may not even be necessarily using painting guides anymore either. You just know what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there. A bit more here. Too much. You can always rub a little off, and if you don't like what you did, the great thing about paint is to a certain point you can paint over it. At some point you might get a little thick there, but you can usually paint over what you need. Alright, that step is done. I'm going to rinse my brush off. Check my next step here. Yeah, I think I'm just going to hold off on the orphans for now. I do want to try to get them finished before Saturday, but I think I'm just going to focus on the bandits. Okay. So, base coat the pants portal blue. I like that, so we'll just stick with that. I don't have portal blue. I'm going to use my own blue I've got here. Just do a dab there. So, I want some nice blue denim on these guys. And you know what? I might vary it up a little bit. I've got a portal blue and I've got another version of blue here. So maybe we'll do 3 in one and 3 in the other. Just to have a little variation, so they all don't look exactly the same. So now I'm going to switch brushes to a finer tip that's a little better for base painting. So we're going to paint those pants blue, and it is okay if we get a little bit on other areas, at least as far as the belt is concerned. So we're looking to get the pants, and then we'll come back and we'll do the shirt and the details. Looks like the jacket is going, let's see. Yeah, so the jacket and the hat, I think it's saying that it can stay, say that black with that highlight, and then we'll dry brush it with some brown. So we don't really want to get blue on our coat or our hat, so we're going to try to keep it mostly on the pants, and then we'll also come back and repaint the boots as well. So this is where you get into some of the finer stuff. So we're going to just try to find, so you see, we're looking for those contours of where the holster are, and so it's easier to try to avoid that as much as possible, so I don't have to repaint over that. But if I do, it's fine. Let's see, I think that's the top of the boot there, so we'll just try to make it easy on myself and stop right there. Come around, come under there. I like this boot a lot. It's one of my favorite colors. It can really pop on certain models. And at least for my taste, when I'm painting a lot of these, I'm really into kind of the grungy look. So I'm gonna finish all these off by toning them with an ink toner. It does make them look a lot dirtier, and that might be too dirty for some people's tastes, but I really like that. And so I'm gonna do that for all of these guys, because I'm really into kind of the grungy look for this. Let's see, I think that's a holster there. Try to come under there. And so you can see, we've already covered up some of our dry brushing. But when you're doing some of that, you know, you think through the steps, and like, you know, it's easier to just go ahead and like do the whole thing, and then you can come back and cover some of it up. So you just gotta kind of think about where you want stuff to be. Okay, I think he's about done. There's this one little area that seems to be, there we go. I think we got it. Yep, like that. So we'll do 2 more with that blue. I squeezed a little too much blue out. That's alright, maybe I might be able to remix it later with something else. Having a little hard time finding the top of this boot. I think that's it. And sometimes the models have little inconsistencies in them. So sometimes it's best to find one that has the clearest detail. And then if you get to another one where the detail might have, you know, disappeared a little bit in the process of making the model, that's okay. You can kind of find it based on what you already know. Come back to him. Yeah, I need to get up under his shirt just a hair. So these bandits got some nice vibrant blue pants, but we'll dirty those up because obviously they wouldn't be quite so clean. Very much looking forward to incorporating them in the next adventure. I'm going to try with some of these to not use them for every adventure so that you can, but I kind of like the idea of having some that are only in specific places because I want to have an interesting story. So I'm probably going to keep my bandit models mostly for the town adventures, and then maybe for a little bit in the canyons, unless I find a specific adventure in the mines that they could fit in. Same thing with some of the monsters. Like I might keep some of the monsters out of the towns unless I'm in a town that really calls for it, or I want to kind of really drive the story with some of those. And again, like, so if I got some blue on the holster, I could cover it up, and I have gotten a little bit on there, but you got to know how your paints are going to react together, and that brown might not cover that blue super well, so it might just take more coat. So it's better to just go ahead and try to avoid those areas that you want to paint with a different color later. So typically in painting, it depends on the medium you're using, but a lot of times, so like with acrylics and watercolors that might be thinner, you don't want to use your lighter paints on top of darker colors because they just won't read through, especially like if you're doing more formal art is what we'll call it, I guess. Your light colors will not read on top of those darker colors, so you always paint light to dark. So you start with a light base and then you gradually add darker and darker colors. And so if you're looking to have something that's like brilliant white, you might actually use your white paper as the lightest color, and then gradually add your dark colors to that. versus something like oil painting, which is thicker and heavier. You might be able to get away with painting some of your lights on top of your darks afterwards. So you might start with your darker bases first, and then do your lights on top. And that's why in with these, which color you use to prime your model can be very important. And so like my flesh tone is a lighter one. It might take like 3 coats to cover up this black, but since I'm using more darker colors than lighter colors, I'm fine with just painting the whole thing black and then taking a few more coats of the lighter colors if need to. The other thing you can do too is after you prime it with your black, if you need to, like, base coat some of your areas that are gonna go lighter with a different lighter color, and maybe one that's thicker. So like maybe I would, if I absolutely needed to, I could paint the flesh with some white first, and then come back with my flesh tone on top of that. Okay, I like those 3. I'm gonna rinse my brush off and get into my next layer set of blue here. I'm not sure how different it will look. I'll just give it a try. So that was turquoise deep, so I'm going to use the Vallejo, or sorry, the Prussia, dark Prussian blue here for these guys' pants. The difference might be subtle. There's some cooler greener tones in the other blue. I can't see a difference. This is a little brighter. The other thing that I could have done, and I'm probably not going to do necessarily, is I could paint each of these bandits a little differently to look like they're part of different gangs. I did do that with my, well, I did not quite, with my warband, my Wasteland warband characters. I chose which warband I wanted them to all be a part of, and I painted them all the same, so I painted them all to be part of the Krakenborn warband. And so I could have done that with this one, where I pick a specific gang and kind of give them those colors, or give each one a different gang color, but I'm not going to really do that. I'm just going to kind of follow the instructions and just do a standard coat on them. Yeah, you can see the difference there between the 2 blues, so that's fine. So they'll have a little bit of difference between them. We probably won't get through all of it tonight, but I'll post some pictures of the final product. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, please go do that. It is Dream Camp Creations, same handle as my YouTube, and that is where I post updates for my videos and some of the work that I'm doing. The one thing I'm going to be trying to do here, probably in the next couple of months, is I'm working on a board game of my own, and I'm in the final stages of figuring out the game mechanics, and so I'm going to then build some prototype pieces, which will just be kind of rough, maybe little hand drawings and things just to represent stuff, because that's what you do when you're prototyping, is you don't want to go too heavy into like the full art of it, because you're figuring out whether the game mechanics that you've come up with actually work. But I'm gonna probably do like a live play test where I've tried to figure out all the rules and come up with some sample pieces, and then play through a version and see what's working and what's not. What I'm trying to decide right now is if in my game I want to, the final look of it, if I want to do like this, where I want full 3D models that some can paint, or if I'm going to have to go with a cheaper version of art, or I kind of make something and it's printed out, on your standard kind of game board material. I don't know yet. That's to kind of figure out later. However, those kind of details are important to me because the final look of the game does have an impact for me of the story you're trying to tell. And so if I don't go with the full 3D models, then I want to make sure that the rest of the mechanics and everything are really spot on, and that you can really live in that world and envelop yourself in that story, even without the gimmick of, and I mean that in the nicest way, the gimmick of a full 3D model. So I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm very excited. So if you're tuning in, maybe you'll join me for that at some point. It will probably be less of a drinking game. The series of videos I'm doing is called Darkstone Drinking, because when I play Shadows of Brimstone, I decided to make it into a drinking game, because again, I would be playing it by myself anyways. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun just to do like a little drinking game, and you can join in. But when I play test, I may not do the drinking game because it's hard enough to focus on someone else's rules. But when you're actually trying to figure out your own, you do have to have some cogency. But I'm very excited about it. It's heavily inspired by the world of Bloodborne. If you've ever played Bloodborne, it's by From Software, the makers of Dark Souls. And I played a little Dark Souls, and I played Sekiro. But I'm really into the world of Bloodborne, so it's that kind of dark gothic horror, monsters and werewolves and things like that, and I just absolutely adore that world. And so I was coming up with a costume for the Ren Fair, or at least like the conceptual idea of a costume. I haven't actually made it yet, and it was kind of this like, tricorn hat wearing person, but like very much sea inspired, and trick weapons. And I was like, ooh, I'm gonna call myself a Deep Warden. I'll be like a protector of the seas. And then I started just kind of going with that idea, and it kind of evolved into this whole mythos of like sea gods versus the moon gods. And so it is very inspired by Bloodborne, but I'm obviously not going to steal everything from it, but I want it to be a very like combat based game with these people with epic sea-based weapons fighting massive sea monsters. And so again, that's when I'm talking about the 3D models versus other versions of art. I wanted this scale, I want to be able to have like a person and then see like this massive creature scaled next to them and really feel that. All right, we're done with that step, so we're gonna move on to the next one. There's Marshall Decker McGraw. He's our main hero that we're following right now. He's one of my earlier ones that I painted when I was still learning, so a little rougher, and I'm not super good on the tiny details. Still learning myself and trying to get better. But okay, so we've painted the pants with blue, so we're gonna now do the boots, rope, and money bag with some dark flesh, which is basically just a dark brown. I've got two main browns I use. The one thing that's always good to do when you're painting is pick your color scheme. And so if you're doing something like what I'm doing now, which I've also again started to kind of do myself, is they give you your color scheme you're going to be working in, and so then you'll use those colors and mix them together for various versions of them. So you want to kind of, if you limit yourself to a color palette, then it becomes a little easier to work with and keeps the model having some consistency. And again, if you apply that to like a larger idea of, you know, all your models in whatever game or version you're playing, if you use that same color palette and color scheme, then they will look like they belong in the same world. So you don't want to necessarily deviate from that too much unless you need to for certain highlights and things like that. And that's with any painting. That you carefully choose your color scheme ahead of time, and then, you know, if you're, let's say you're doing, you know, you're doing these pants with that blue, instead of just finding a lighter blue to do highlights, you mix that blue with some white or a lighter color, and then you come back and dry brush over it with the same blue so that you stay tonally consistent. So this is where we get a little more highly detailed. And so the other thing that I was talking about, the ink wash that I'm going to do later, will do is it will kind of blend my colors in a little bit together and maybe soften up some of those edges so that he looks a little more correct. Okay, just gonna do this boot here. So we're doing the boots, rope, and the money bag. I guess technically it said that I was supposed to paint not do that on the holster. The holster was supposed to stay more in that dark black, but that's okay. I kind of like the dark brown leather look, so I think we'll just keep it. So we'll just keep his cloak in that black scheme, and we won't worry about matching the holster to that. And if I need to, I can always darken those up. I'm not even sure that I'm necessarily going to keep all the cloaks the same black color. I'm just kind of following the steps as a guide, mostly so I have talking points. But I may change things up here as I go to make them unique. And again, these are yours, so you do what you want with them. So since I went ahead and painted the straps of his holster, then I'll go ahead and just go ahead and paint his holster too. And maybe they'll all be different. Maybe I'll just go ahead and start that process now, where this guy will have more of a dark leather holster, and then maybe one of them I'll keep more in the black, and we'll call him Black Bart or something. And you can see him kind of getting a little too much on the pants. That's right, that'll blend out a little as we add colors. I try to get a fine tip brush. Again, the quality of the tools you invest in is important. The higher quality paints and brushes you use, then the easier your work will be. I am a cheapskate though, and so I don't invest in the highest of qualities, and so that just means you have to sometimes work against the tools that you have and work a little bit harder to either be more careful or more blending or things like that. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't do what I do, do what I say, and don't do what I say what I'm doing. I might just stick with this guy for now and see how far I can get. I want to go to bed at 10:30. So I'll come back and finish the rest off camera. So we need to finish up his rope here. A money bag. Where's his money bag at? There it is. Okay. Check around. I think that's it. So we'll clean off our brush. Move on to the next step. Base coat the hands and the face with some light flesh. So again, this is the lighter color, so it may take more than one, we'll see. But again, I'm also fine with like a dingier look, so. Yeah, that's actually probably going to be okay, and if we need to just hit certain areas with a second coat, we may do that. And you can see in my pan, that color is right up there. It looks very peachy, but when you put it on that black, it looks a lot lighter. And you can see if I overwork it there, then that black starts to read through a little more. So again, what you're painting on top of can have a big impact on what the final coloration actually is. But this is always so fun when you start to put those lighter colors on, you really get to see it start to transform. Finding the fingers is always a little difficult. Okay, and then we're gonna try to sneak up under here. He's got a bandana on. Which we'll come back and paint some red on. Again, because I'm doing such small areas and thin coats, he's gonna dry pretty quickly. So I can keep going. Without having to wait for him to dry too much. So we do the shirt with a light coat of Shadow Black and Spirit White, which I might just add just a little bit of white to what I already have. And just lighten that up a little bit. Just a tad. We'll just put some white off to the side here. And then grab a little bit of that gray mixture that we made. And rope that in. Grab a little more if I need to. Yeah, I like that. We'll go with that. So now we're going to paint his shirt. So this is where we start. We've got to be a little careful because now we have those ropes that we've done. I'm going to try to come carefully around those and not get too much on what we've done so we have less repainting to do. Gotta figure out where his bandana wants to stop. That seems about right. So I'm gonna come up under here. We gotta figure out where his cloak stops. So I think his coat stops about right there. So we're gonna come up under here. Paint, yeah, that seems about right. I like that. Kind of folds in over itself there, so we're just gonna fill all this in. seams. Oh, and then he's got a tad bit of shirt just peeking out under his belt there, so we're just gonna hit that. And as you start to go, you start to see areas that were kind of hidden before that are popping out. Like I see a little bit here that I need to touch. I think I like his look there. So that's kind of the major painting then. So the next part is to highlight. Oh, we've got to do his mask. We'll go ahead and do his mask with some Celine red. And again, red, no matter what paint you're using, is just always super light. So we'll see. I might have to do a few coats here. So we're gonna take some red and do his mask. Well, no, this one's actually working. I lied. It's because I'm going a little thicker here. This might not dry quite as fast either, so we may not get to the highlights on his bandana quite as quickly. And you can see in there there's a little bit of black that's poking through. I'm fine with that though, because I'm gonna go and darken it up anyways. So now this is where we're gonna get a little tricky, because we've got to really get in there, and we want just a little swoop of red without hitting his cloak too much, and I kind of want to get under here too, so that it goes all the way behind. Yeah, all right, cool. I like it. Okay, now we're into the highlight and details portion. So the pants should have dried at this point. I'm going to move these guys out of the way because they're going to be different. So we're going to take a little bit of our blue and mix it into some white here for a highlight color. Just dab a little on the bottom of my paintbrush. Mix that in and just see what that looks like. And so we're going to highlight. And so you could dry brush, or you could take it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to dry brush a little bit. So I'm going to take my stiffer bristle brush. I'm going to knock a little less off than I normally do for dry brushing, and I'm going to just come in here and lightly at first and just start to try to find the places where the pants stick out, so you're looking to highlight those folds. And that's a little much, so I'm going to wipe a little off here. I also want to try to avoid my holster a little bit, so I could have done this first before I painted my holster if I really wanted to. And so we try to want to, yeah, I'm not doing a great job at this. So I'm just going to kind of dirty them up here. You can always grab a brush and kind of smooth things a little bit before it dries too much. Oh, that was way too much. I wet my brush and see if I can't salvage that. I might have to come back and clean that up a little bit. I'm just going to take a brush without any paint. There we go. See, I'll just kind of hit that. And it bleeds it out a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to take this brush instead. And I'm just going to kind of go in here and hit the whole thing and just kind of give it a real light dusting. That's a little better. It's not my favorite. I didn't do a great job with that one, but what can you do? I guess you could do better. That's what you could do, but what's the fun in that? Okay. Highlight the shirt with Spirit White, so we just want to take some bright white here. So this one I may actually then, instead of trying to dry brush it, I am going to just take my fine tip brush, not get too much excess on there, and come in here and let's see if you can focus on that a little better. There we go. I actually find the folds of the shirt, and I'm going to kind of hit them like that. And again, the toning ink that I'll use will kind of soften those details. So we're looking to kind of get the where the shirt kind of raises on itself, and then that toner ink will seep into the shadows, and then also just kind of blend everything together. So we're going to highlight the rope then with some desert yellow. Put just a little bit of that on there. So the rope is here. Now in their version, they've got some real details on the rope, so I'm going to kind of just come up in this kind of hatch motion here and try to hit that rope around there. See if those details can kind of come out a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then we take some leather brown, which is a slightly lighter brown here, and we'll highlight all of the brown of his boots and his money bag and all of that. So this is another area where I'm gonna use blend. So I'm gonna use this stiffer bristle brush, get some brown paint on there, and then for the boots I'm gonna kind of do more of a dry brush because I do like that dirty look. And then I am going to actually do that kind of all over here. And then I am going to actually take a little bit of that, and I'm going to just kind of dry brush the bottom of his cloak a little, because I want him to look weathered and dirty, and see how it just kind of starts to give some color and texture to the bottom there. I really like that. So I'm just going to keep kind of dry brushing. Start at the bottom there a little more intense and then kind of fade that up. Yeah, I think that's nice. And then I might even just kind of hit all of them with just a light dusting of this, just so he looks a little dirtier. I like that. Okay. And then take a little bit of this Spirit White and dab some Saloon Red in there to make a slightly lighter pink color. And we will highlight the mask with that. And I just want to go ever so light on there. And I don't want to do like the whole thing. I just kind of want to hit the top edges. So again, when you're looking at them from afar, and so we'll blend all that. Oops. I think one thing that I'm going to do too is I'm going to take a little bit of this leather brown And I'm gonna give his hat just a tiny band. There is a band there, and I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of hit that with a little leather brown here, just to make that pop. I guess I could have done the dark brown, but I like this lighter one. And the others, maybe I'll play with some different colors on their bands. Okay. And then final thing we'll do, really, if we like where his cloak's at, which I do, I kind of actually like that black look, at least for him. We'll just kind of leave him there. We're gonna do his pistol. So you can there's a couple different ways to do this. You can either get a metallic paint, or you can use simple grays, variations of grays. You could like paint this gray and then use gradients and white highlights to give the gun a look of metal. I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna actually use a dark metallic color, and I'm gonna do the whole gun in that, and then I'm gonna use my light metallic color to come back and highlight it. But you can achieve the same, reflective metal look with just matte paint if you're careful and know what you're doing. Let me touch his hands up here. Okay, let that dry for just a second. I'm going to grab my light silver. Which, I already have it out. One reason to do models in succession, like where you paint a lot of them together, is you waste paint a little less, because it's hard to get just tiny amounts of paint that you need just for one model. So it saves you a little paint if you paint a few of them together. So I'm just going to kind of highlight the gun here with this lighter color. Okay. There's really just two more steps here. We're going to, all the bases, I kind of paint the same color. I just take this light leather brown and I paint all of them, all those stones and dirt that color, and then I highlight them with some fang bones. We're not actually going to get to that step tonight because this will take longer to dry. But so we're just going to come in here and get this nice brown in, and then tomorrow on my own I will come back and highlight those rocks with some fang bone, and then I will wash the whole model with I just have some Higgins ink I use. The Shadows of Brimstone comes with a toning ink, but I ran out of that, and so I just made my own. So I just kind of make this like dark ink mix that I wash the whole model with, and it just kind of, again, blends those colors together a little bit, gives it a nice grungy look, and kind of softens the whole thing up, and I just really like the way that turns out. So I'm gonna wash the whole thing with that after those highlights, and then paint the sides of this base nice and black, and then I'm gonna glue some of those either cactuses or tumbleweeds or whatnot in there. I'm not gonna craft any special pieces this time. Sometimes I make my own, like, so for some of my monsters I made little skulls, or I'll make wagon parts, but I'm not going to do that for these guys. I'm just using some pre-bought stuff that I'll just kind of modify a little bit and glue them on there, and then they'll be done and ready to play with. Pew pew pew. just a couple little areas to get. While I've got this color out, I might actually just lightly hit his boots a little bit with this stuff and just kind of carry that color up and just make some mud. The other thing I'm going to do, which it didn't call for, is I'm going to just lightly highlight his brown areas with this stuff. And then I'm going to actually grab a little of my bronze gold and I'm going to highlight his buckle. And then call that good. So we're just going to come on the belt buckle just a hair. See if we can do this without getting too much on. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I think he's not too bad. Any other metal parts? Nope. Alright, so he's done. And you can see the difference when it's also, I'll finish up those highlights on the stones tomorrow and then add his cactuses and tumbleweeds and then finish painting the rest of them. And you can also speed up your process a little bit too. You know, if you just do them all together, then, you know, kind of just tackles it all at once. But I'll finish those guys up and do my orphans. So I'm going to try to do all this by Saturday so they'll be ready to play. But again, that's what that color actually looks like with the dark ink. So you can see how he's just softer in his variation. So that's what eventually the bandit will look like. He'll have a similar look there. So they'll be able to go at it on Saturday. There'll be a shootout in the town. So we'll go from there. All right, thanks everybody. Hit the like and subscribe button if you're watching. Again, this is just kind of a fun jump off from what I'm normally doing, but I'm going to keep going on the Shadows of Brimstone adventure on Saturday at 9 or 9:30. I'll put updates on my Instagram, and these will all be uploaded onto playlists that you can watch at any time. So yeah, please like and subscribe, come back and check out some of my other work. Have a good night.